I got to listen to his message from last week. How many people were here or you listened to the podcast and you got to hear his message? A few of you? Yeah. Hi, Aaron. Good to see you. Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about legacy for the past few weeks. I think in general, the older I'm getting, the more my kids are getting older, and I'm thinking more about like, what do I have to leave them? What do I have to pour into them? And Ethan kind of dove a little bit last week into legacy and about fighting the battles so that your children don't have to. Fighting the battles so the next generation doesn't have to, because they'll have the tools that you had to conquer it. And is this okay? Is this mic okay? Does it sound okay? Okay. And I think so often about who has impacted Ethan and I's life in helping us become the people that we are, who God has used to work through to help us become who we are. I think about, obviously, our parents. You know, Rod and Lisa and my parents have been huge for pouring in integrity and work ethic and teaching us to serve well, to keep fighting through. They've given us like the gift of stubbornness to like push through in the hard times. And those are like a given, like the things that your parents kind of pour into your life with. And then I think about the people who didn't have to do anything, but they just decided, like, I'm going to be there for that person. And like one of those people for us is Brad Sundberg. If you knew my husband before Brad, you would know that man had a lot of skills that did not involve hammers and tools and other things. And when we first moved here, we were 23, and we had Grayson. And within 6-7 months of getting here, we got a house and we got pregnant with Scarlett, our second child. And we bought a house. This was our first house that we owned. Everything before we had rented, where a landlord fixes everything. And we got this house that was way too big for us to manage, but we got a killer deal on it, and we didn't know how to do a thing. So God knew what he was doing, because right around the corner from us, just 2 minutes down the road, were the Sundbergs. And they very quickly became our go-to call of people like, hey, how do I do this? YouTube's not cutting it. I don't know how to do it. And Brad and Cheryl, I say Cheryl because she let us have him so many nights fixing things where he'd get home from work, and instead of being able to be home and be with his family, he's over at our house building a wall or fixing a sink. Ethan knows how to fix a sink now. Yeah. And none of that was required. And we're in a culture now that is very self-absorbed and we look out for our own, and that's good. We should take care of ourselves, obviously. We should take care of our children. But our culture has lost a value for pouring into people outside of our household. And so today I really want to talk about legacy and how legacy is a kingdom quality, that the Lord really cares about legacy. I think it's like one of the most important topics we could ever talk about, because legacy forces us to stay honed in on the Lord while being able to look at a physical face. You know, it's easy to like lose track of time in life, in our walk with the Lord, when we're thinking we've got like our whole lifetime before we meet him at the pearly gates. And we can very quickly kind of get lazy in our walk with him. So let me first just say, I'm not talking about salvation today. How do we get salvation? Only through the blood. It is not through your works. It is not through anything you can do. Titus 3:5 says he saved us not because of the righteous things we had done, but because of his mercy. He saved us through the washing of the rebirth and the renewal of the Holy Spirit. So what we're talking about today is not baby Christian material. We're not talking about your salvation and your ability to get into heaven and be with the Lord. We're going to be talking about the maturity in our walk. And mature Christians have a value for legacy. They have a value for seeing the generations ahead, whether in your own family lineage or not, steward well the earth. All right. So I'm going to take you back to 2006. Okay, 2006, I was in junior high. I'm only 28, so I know some of you are like, that is really young, okay? So I grew up in a pastor's family. My family is very musical, generations of musicians. And, you know, most of the time, especially if you have a smaller church, you pull on anybody you can. So like you've seen, we've got an 11-year-old playing bass up here because she is capable and available. So I had a very similar situation. So when I was growing up, we got to about 6th, 7th grade, and we had a youth group, very small youth group, like 15 kids, and nobody wanted to do worship to Wow Hits anymore. Anybody here remember? You guys, do you know Wow Hits? Okay, no, Haley's like, Our Gen Zs don't know. And so we decided we're gonna make a youth band. None of us know how to do anything. Now, mind you, I had a grandfather who was a guitar collector. So we all had like these heirloom guitars passed down to us, and like wonderful. Like if, Brian, you would love this. You would love to see all this. And we just decided we're gonna figure out how to do this. So we go to my parents and we're like, we need to make a band. Like we're gonna be a band. We're gonna be the next Barlow Girls or Zoe Girls. This, I'm telling you, this is early 2000s, okay? And my parents, who, mind you, most people that have small churches, they're going to be working like secular jobs on top of pastoring because generally there's just not the income to do it. So my parents are really busy. My mom is a music director over a private school. She's working like 7 a.m. till 4, and then she's doing, you know, band, whatever, drumline, football games and musicals and all this stuff. My dad is working at the church and then doing other odds and end jobs in addition to be able to put us through private school and all, you know, all this stuff. And they just looked at us and they're like, okay, well, what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to have rehearsals because you all don't know how to do anything. So we'll get together, mom will take the girls, because we had no guys that wanted to sing. Mom will take the girls to sing, and she'll teach you guys how to sing harmony in parts, and dad will take the musicians, and we'll have basically band practice. So we would get together on either Saturday mornings or a Wednesday night, and it was a group of like 11 youth kids who know nothing. Mind you, too, youth kids that their voices are changing, they're ornery, they think they know everything. We had a few people that, you guys know what a metronome is, you know, the keeps time. Okay. We had one kid that he just could not stay with the click, and he goes, the metronome's wrong. It's wrong. It's not right. I'm right. The metronome's wrong. And it's like, the metronome can't be wrong. It's right. And we would get together and we would practice every single week, just learning harmony parts, getting through the girl drama of, I want to lead that song. No, I want to lead that song. You know, discipling, teaching character building all along the way until we finally had about 4 songs down. We had How Great Is Our God. We had Revelation Song. I think we had Beautiful One. And we would play those 4 songs every week because that's what we could do. And we would, we just kept practicing and practicing. My parents are helping us. We had a kid who didn't have an instrument, so my parents went and bought him an instrument. And we get to the point where like, we're actually getting good, okay? And we're getting good enough to the point where we're not a distraction. So you ever heard you're hearing the wrong notes the whole time through? It was like that for a while. When we got to the point where we were a distraction, my parents started to have us play on Sundays. So we had youth band once a month rotated into the schedule, and we got to play for like the main congregation. And I say all of this to say that not many kids get poured into like that outside of school anymore. And I think a lot of it, my opinion is a lot of it is we've got a lot more rush society, and we also have a perfectionist society where we're not willing to go through the ugly part to get to the beautiful part. So fasting forward to when we're graduating high school, and I'm wanting to go to Bethel. Oh, here, can you show those pictures, Elliot? Okay, that's my brother. That's my brother with his Gibson. That was my grandpa's. So he's like 15 there. We're playing at like an outreach event. It's my older brother, Caleb. You can go to the next one. That's my little brother, Seth. So he plays drums. He's an incredible drummer today, like amazing. You keep going. He was like 13 there. That was our youth band. That's me, my sister in the back, and that other girl right there. They were 11, and I was 15 there, I think, and then the guitarist is 15. So stay on this one for a minute. So fasting forward, we graduate in high school, and I decide I want to go to Bethel, and I want to try out for the worship team there because I love to worship. I feel like this is my calling. At the time, I absolutely adored Kim Walker, and I'm like, I am going to get to know her, so I need to be on the worship team. And so I applied there, and I went to auditions. There were over 500 people auditioning for the worship team. Now, mind you, the people that are coming, they're not like fresh out of high school. There's people from all ages of like right out of high school to people who have had huge careers, and they've decided to take a year off just to go and pursue the Lord and grow in the Lord. There's people that were worship pastors at massive mega churches for 4 or 5 years. Then they decided, like, I'm gonna take a break. I'm just gonna take this time, like a sabbatical, basically, to dive into the Lord. And so when I went to try out, they were picking 30 people out of those 500, and I made it. And so, and I'm not saying that to like toot my own horn. What I'm saying is that wouldn't have happened if no one poured into me and no one taught me. Then this guy right here, that's Matt Ogden. He actually went to Bethel the following year after me. He's still with Bethel. He's got an amazing career with Bethel Music. He's one of their main producers and incredible bass player, like absolutely amazing. And he's there, and he's just, and it's not like my parents gave him every skill, but it's like the seeds that were planted, and then he stewarded it from beyond that point. And so I share all of this to say that 2 people completely altered the course of what many young people's lives looked like completely. And when you're in it, it feels so mundane and so stupid. When you're running practices and people are showing up 30 minutes late, 40 minutes late, they're not even coming, they're fighting with each other. We're dealing with huge performance issues on the stage because nobody has a mature enough relationship with the Lord to just like not be petty. And they were like, nope, we're doing it anyways. We're sowing seeds. One day, there's going to be a benefit. One day, we're going to reap a harvest. And the harvest for Matt, like, it's not like my parents have him at their church anymore, but the harvest is oftentimes partaken by somebody that didn't sow into it. Do you know what I mean? But it's like it's a benefit to the church as a whole, to the whole body of the church. So is there another picture? Okay, so that's another outreach event. So during that time, we actually got really good. We became like kind of known in the northern Utah, Colorado, Wyoming area, and we got to go play at like multiple different like conferences, like adult conferences, youth conferences, like all over. And every single one of those people still plays to this day, still plays in church to this day. That's like the big thing. And obviously your skills can be used in the secular world, but every single person that you've seen in these pictures still maintains a relationship with the Lord and is like serving him with all their hearts. Which is wild. That's not normal. That's not normal at all. So heaven isn't socialistic. When you die, when you go to heaven one day, you're not going to get the same thing as the person next to you in reward. Matthew 16:27 says, "For the Son of Man is coming with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done." 2 Corinthians 5:10, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil." So by no means am I preaching works for your salvation, but as mature believers, as ones that are past the point of conquering sin, it is our responsibility to pour into the people around us and to create a legacy beyond our household. When Brad came over all the time helping us fix our dishwasher, helping us get under a sink and fish pork, stinky old pork out of a sink. When they're rushing over to our house because Scarlett had a seizure so that we can take an ambulance to the hospital. That is all legacy. Like every bit of it. When you impact someone's walk in a positive way and you give them a skill that they didn't have before, or you provide a way to healing that they didn't have before, that is legacy. And I think too often we've decided what's spiritual and what's not spiritual. Like we're willing to give our time to like a Bible study with somebody, but we may not be willing to help them, I don't know, like fix something electrical that they don't know how to do, but you do. And I guess what I want to like say right now is like, it's an even playing field, that it's all spiritual. If you're doing it unto the Lord, if you're doing it because of who God is in you and who he's created you to be, it's spiritual. And it impacts people's lives more than you'll probably ever realize. I don't know. Like, I don't think you and Cheryl will ever know how much you guys have impacted our lives. There's tons of people. I mean, I'm using Brad as an example because a lot of the other people in our lives that have poured into us in significant ways you guys don't know. And I want to give a face of an example to this. So for something that's, I'll hit on how God works spiritually in even those that aren't believers and how he redeems things. So my parents, obviously, they're both believers, but my dad actually wasn't a believer till he was 19. He grew up in Wyoming in a one stoplight town, kind of like Lexington, but a whole lot more redneck. So he grew up in a very musical family. My grandpa, incredible guitar player, like incredible, plays the banjo, plays the mandolin. Like, you want to hear good bluegrass? Some recordings of my grandpa is amazing. And then my grandma played bass, and my aunt played drums, and my dad also played guitar. So my dad grew up really rough, real rough. He spent most school nights sleeping under tables at bars. After they'd play a gig, he'd be sleeping under a table till they were ready to leave at 2 or 3 in the morning. And his mom died at 19. She had a blood clot and died in her sleep when he was 19 years old at the age of 43. And he met the Lord actually in his dorm room right after she passed. And he was an alcoholic, functioning alcoholic. He'd been a drinker since he was 11 or 12 years old. And every addiction that he had in that dorm room from that point, he got completely delivered from. And I know that doesn't happen for a lot of people, but for him it did, and it was amazing. And so I look at his life, and I look at, as rough as it was, he had parents that loved him. They truly loved their kids, and they taught him so many skills that if he didn't have, he would not be pastoring today. My dad is very handy. He can fix anything. And he's a lead pastor at a church that doesn't have didn't always have the funding to hire like a handyman. Like it was like the pastor's going to do it. If you don't know, most churches, not here, but most churches that are smaller, pastor does it all. It's like you wear a lot of hats. And my grandpa died actually the week I found out I was pregnant with Grayson, and he did accept the Lord into his life before he passed. So he's in heaven now. But to look back at my grandfather's life and every single seed he sowed into my dad, I look at it and I'm like, he literally paved the way for my dad to walk out his ministry. Everything from teaching him how to install a plow onto a truck, because you got to plow your church's driveway or parking lot at 4 a.m. before a service, to relearning how to drywall because there was a huge leak in the roof and water was pouring in during your service. I'm not kidding you. I had so many church services growing up where you would just listen to water falling the whole time the service is going, because in the back corner, it's just like, it was something. And my dad fixed it all. My dad did it all. And he did it all with my brothers. So now they know how to do it. And I feel like, I know this is like super Captain Obvious basic stuff, but yet it's lacking in our culture. So I'm going to talk about it. So I know that you're probably like, okay, what are you getting to? Obviously we need to teach people what they need to do. It's lacking. So we've got to talk about it. So can you put up the pictures of my grandparents? Okay. So that's my grandma. She played bass. And then my dad is right there. And then my grandpa's right here. And my dad, to this day, in worship, he plays like the lead line licks that like my grandpa used to play to like other secular songs. You know what I mean? And you wouldn't hear it and like hear another melody of a secular song. It's things that he made up to go along with it. But to this day, when you hear my father play, if you knew my grandpa, you would say like, that's Frank Schreier's boy. That's Frank Schreier's boy. And I want so desperately for people in our society to come across, young and old, and say like, oh, like that's God's child. That's like, that one belongs to Christ. That one, because there are so many attributes that are put in them. And I'm not talking about just, somebody who's forgiving and somebody who's kind and loving. I'm saying like those who work hard, those who steward, those who have integrity and stick in when the going gets tough, those who are creative and innovate. Like that is kingdom qualities and kingdom legacy that we look out for our own. I'm going to read you a quote from Art Garfunkel. And it says, "It seems to me that at 19 or 20, a young man is burning to be great at something. I was. You have a vision that's beyond the neighborhood. You want to make a mark while you're alive, and you don't know exactly your future, but you want to be great at it. And greatness is an important word. And you dare not to tell anybody how extreme and how burning are your visions because you don't want anybody to mess with them." We have a generation of people right now who are paving their own way without without the older generations. And I believe 100% with everything in me, it's because they're scared to death of somebody messing with the dream, somebody putting out the flame. I remember when I went to Bethel, my parents are, if you don't know, I haven't even referenced this. If you don't know, Bethel's a really large mega church out in California, and they have a ministry school. So my parents are really good friends with a lot of the staff members there. And when I went, I didn't want them to inform any of the staff members that I was coming. I didn't want them to know that like the Schreier's daughter was coming, because I had an idea and a vision of who I wanted to be, and I didn't want anything to get just in the way of it. A lot of them knew I had a really rebellious teenage experience, like junior high, horrible teenage experience. My parents were contacting all their friends around the country asking to pray because Lydia's running away. We don't know where she went. Lots. And I knew that a lot of them knew that stuff, and not that I expected them to hold it over my head, but I just wanted to let that flame be my flame. And I didn't trust anybody. I didn't want anyone to come in and blow it out. Like, I had a dream, I had a plan to pursue music, and I didn't want anybody messing with it. And in the end, I had a pretty lonely experience. I didn't have mothers and fathers around. I moved out at 17. I graduated early. My parents let me move to California. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't think I'd let my kid do it, but they let me move to California, barely 17 years old. I needed mothers and fathers. You're there with a bunch of other adults, so people expect you to be an adult. I should have been an adult, and it's not like I fell into sin and everything, but I lived a very lonely 2 years where I just wanted to go home constantly. I needed parents. I needed spiritual parents. I needed somebody to be a big sister. I needed that. And most of the time, I know in my situation, I didn't let people know I needed that. That's usually the case for all of us, right? We don't usually want people to know what's going on in us until we're better, until we've come out on the other side. And it'd go a lot easier if you had people with you. We have a generation just like that quote, that dare not to speak because they're terrified that we'll blow out their dream. I would dare say we have every generation who dares not to speak because they're terrified other people will blow out their dream. This is a multi-generational problem. I would say it gets more emphasis on the youngest generation because of the innocence that is at stake, but it's a multi-generational problem. My season for sowing into people's legacy looks really different right now. Obviously, I've got 4 little children, and I think a lot of people, they are questioning to themselves, okay, I want to give my all. I want to sow into the kingdom. I got you. I agree that legacy is necessary, but I have no idea how I'm supposed to do that when I'm trying to pay a mortgage. I'm working 60 hours a week. I'm, raising babies at home. I want to pour into these people that are broken, but I also want to have some boundaries. There's all those things, right? And I think we take it like an extremist perspective. I'm an extremist, okay? As soon as I get a hobby, I dive fully into it and I decide it's my next career. I kid you not. I like to paint and draw and stuff like that. And I've done gallery stuff in the past when I was younger. And I told Ethan the other day, I was like, I think I'm just going to start a business. I'm going to make a website and start an Etsy. And then I might get a booth at this event. And then I'm going to do this. And he's like, slow down. What? You're scaling this thing, and like you just had the idea 5 seconds ago, and I'm like, it's just an idea. But we go into it with the extremist perspective where we're like, okay, I see Haley. I feel like I need to pour into Haley, and like there's something about her, and she's just making my heart turn, and I feel so much of the Lord on her, and I want to do stuff for her. And so I got to see if she can meet with me like every Wednesday, and we're going to dive into the Bible, and then we're going to go through this study, and we're going to, like, she's my girl, she's my person. And sometimes you will have people like that, and there will be a grace on your life to pour into somebody that heavily. But most times, it's the little things of staying dependent on the Lord and saying, God, what do you want me to do today? Hey, buy that book for them and go bring them a coffee. That was my thing that I did for a friend like 2 weeks ago. It's super simple. No strings attached. Didn't cost me anything of my day. You know what I mean? Or like for me right now, it looks like teaching Ellie how to play with a band, with piano, and helping Sophie, and teaching harmonies for girls. It's a super low commitment type thing because I'm kind of in the middle of a storm of raising children. And I think we just make things so extreme where we're like, that's a mess. That's a potential mess. And I don't want to get into that. Like, that's just too much. What if they call me often? What if they actually say yes to me saying, I'll help with this? What if, and we just think that we're going to be like tied to them forever. And the Lord's just not asking you to worry about tomorrow. In Matthew, don't borrow the troubles of tomorrow, for tomorrow has enough troubles of its own. Tomorrow will worry about itself. The Lord's not asking for you to start the next movement with your neighbor down the road. Most likely, maybe he is. He's just asking you to open your eyes to the people around you, and when you see a need, listen, if you see it, most likely he's saying do something because he's drawing your attention. And if you don't feel him on it, then like maybe that's for somebody else to do. You always say, well, yes, but not that. Making sure to not jump in and helping everybody because that could steal somebody else's blessing. Yeah, so that's a confusing way of me saying it just now. But we would go to Rod and Lisa about things and be like, oh, I really feel like I'm supposed to like help them. Like they're really struggling financially. Should we give money? And he would tell us like, just make sure you know it's Holy Spirit, because if it's somebody else's job to do that, you're stealing their blessing. Because are we blessed when we give? Yes. So knowing it's as simple as that, like knowing the person in front of you being like, Jesus, do I help this person? Do I do this? And if he's saying, most of the time it's a yes for things, but if he's saying no, it's because it's somebody else's blessing. It's somebody else's lesson that they're going to learn through. Sorry, I'm a little lost in my notes. So Paul in Romans 1, I didn't give this to you, Elliot. Don't worry about it. He calls himself a bond servant. He says, like Paul, a bond servant of Jesus Christ. Does anybody know what a bond servant is? No? Okay. A bond servant is somebody who was a slave, who was given freedom, and they decided still to stay with their master because they had a love for their master so much that they didn't want to leave him, and they would stay and they'd say, I'll still serve you. I'll be your bond servant. And actually back in culture back then, they would pierce, I can't remember if it was their left ear or their right ear, they'd pierce their ear, and that was an indicator that they were free, but that they had chosen to stay. So they wouldn't be treated as those that weren't free, but they were chosen to stay, and so they'd pierce their ear. And Christianity has slowed down from salvation. for many. We get saved. We either stay in the sin grind, where we're deciding what sin we want, what we don't want, instead of giving all to the Lord, or we conquer the sin grind, and we get an appetite for his goodness, for his holiness, and we're not struggling with that anymore, but it kind of slows down there. And what happens for many Christians, when you're in a stagnant state, when you're in a state of not going for more, of not pursuing his kingdom with what you do, with your works, you will become discontent, and you will soon start to question, what is all this for? What is all this even about? We're just going to church, we worship, we listen to a message, life's not really changing, I'm just doing things, and I'm not struggling with this addiction anymore, or I'm not swearing or dealing with, all this sin, but I'm just not content. And we want more out of life, and we don't know where to get it. And we hear the blanket statements like, well, it's just Jesus. It's found in Jesus. It's just Jesus. It is Jesus. It's in his character of who he is, and you are built in his identity. You know that being created in the character of God means that every single person has like a parental identity in them. Every person that's created in the Father's image has a God-given desire to father, to mother, to teach, to disciple, to pour out. And when you're not walking in that identity, and you're not bringing people along, helping disciple them, helping father and mother them, you become discontent. I have been here. Joyce Meyer says, if you're ever feeling depressed, if you ever feel like you're just in depression, go serve. It's the quickest way out of depression. And the reason why isn't just because it's a good thing to do. It's because you were created to father and mother at every age that you're in. And it looks different. If you don't have a bunch of depth with the Lord, you don't need to be teaching somebody deep theology, but there's always something that we can do. When Brad is teaching Ethan how to fix a sink or build a wall, that is a form of fathering, even though it's peer-to-peer. And he's not over there calling Brad daddy, it's weird. But we were created to father and mother, each one of us. We were also created all to be sons and daughters. We want to be more like Jesus. We were created to be sons and daughters. That also means that we need to be under other people's influence in our life. I'm not talking about control and people just being able to tell you everything that you should do or convince you you're not hearing from the Lord. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that fulfillment here on earth as brothers and sisters of Christ looks like an exchange. It doesn't end at Jesus saying, now go into the world and preach the gospel. It doesn't end there. There is an exchange that it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. I mean, I'm sure you can think in your life of people that have poured into you and impacted you in just immense ways. There's the little stuff, even I think Ethan might have mentioned this last week when we were in the hospital with Scarlett with RSV. She was intubated for 8 days. She almost did not make it. They were telling us she'll most likely have brain damage, severe handicaps, because she went without oxygen for an hour of apneic spells of 3 to 4 minutes for an hour straight. And so we're in the pit thinking we're going to have a handicapped child if she makes it even. She's 3 weeks old. I am postpartum, hormonal, broken, just had a lot of other drama stuff going on at the same time. And Jessica Barty, if you don't, who knows Jessica Barty? She's amazing. Okay. She shows up at the hospital, at Children's Hospital at Detroit, and brings us these food gift cards to all the restaurants that were in the hospital, which was like 3. I think it was like a Big B's copy of Wendy's or something. Anyways, and she brings us these gift cards, and I'm telling you, to this day, that simple, practical act was one of the most spiritual impacts of my life. Because in a time where I was completely broken, I felt unseen by anybody who wasn't like really close family. And I felt like people didn't understand. People didn't realize how bad it was. I was about to lose my child, all of this. And she just shows up. We weren't really close friends. We were like more of acquaintances at the time. And she just shows up, and she was there because her son has had multiple surgeries himself, and he had an appointment there, and she knew that we were there. So she just nonchalantly was like, well, I was here anyway, and I just remember people doing this for me. So I thought I'd do it for you. And still to this day, when we tell her how much it means to us, she's like, well, somebody did it for me. So I did it for you. That is legacy. Somebody did it for me. So I'm going to do it for you. You look at Christ's death, what he did for us, like the amount of sacrifice and pain he was willing to withstand just for you. I really want like everyone here, people far beyond here, but like let it start here, that we start keeping our heads up, looking, that we realize that we have more time, wealth, love to give than we realize. And like I said, I'm not like preaching the extremism of, overextend yourself. I'm saying that though we have a lot of life to live left, most of us, the Bible tells us that it's a vapor. And you don't know. You don't know. My little brother was away from the Lord a few years ago, and he was agnostic, and just a lot of pain, a lot of church hurt that kind of encouraged his way out the door. And he, I think I was 24 when this happened. He was driving back from Vegas up to northern Utah, and he fell asleep in his Jeep at the wheel going 80 through the desert. Rolled it 8 times, had the window down. He says he felt his head like hitting against the pavement the whole time. He got wrecked, and he made it. He lived, and which that in itself was a miracle. But he told us afterwards, he said when he first rolled and hit, that's when he woke up and he realized what was happening. And he said, all I could think about in that moment was, oh my gosh, I'm going to hell. 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 And then the car stopped rolling, and then he passed out. And I remember getting the call from my dad at 3 a.m. Seth's in the hospital. It's really bad. He's crying. And I'm thinking, like, my brother's going to die. Like, my little brother. And the whole time I'm thinking, he doesn't believe in Jesus. And the whole time I'm thinking, like, this is the life and death thing. This is like the big thing that we all focus on in Christianity. And when we got through it, and he's making it and everything, I thought to myself, yeah, that was the big thing, but there were a ton of little things that could have prevented that big thing. And I want to see believers, and I want to be the believer that slows down enough and reaches people and helps be a mouthpiece in the hands and feet of the Lord to create strong, mature believers that aren't shaken so much that they fall away from the Lord, and then they're falling asleep at the wheel, flipping in a Jeep, about to go to hell. I know that's intense, but like life's like that. And it's the little tiny decisions all the way along the way. And that big thing, that big moment of like possibly passing over into the other side of eternity, there was a ton of stuff before that could have changed. Because I remembered being the sister that ratted him out when he was smoking weed. When my parents were in Africa, they came home angry. I remember being the sister that I went through my self-righteous phase with him. And like, I thank the Lord that he's with Jesus now and that he loves the Lord and he's like returned back. But it took a lot because he had a dream as a teenager of what he wanted to do. He's going to go into music with a band. He had a good band. And they were a Christian band playing in secular spots. And he very quickly realized, if I start telling people, if I start telling them where I'm playing, the kind of music, they're gonna cast me aside, so I'm just not even gonna tell them. And then he isolates. And then very quickly he becomes impacted by the people that he did surround himself with because, well, these people will accept me. These people only judge me. And there's some truth to some of that, and there's also some just the enemy's given lies. You know what I mean? Like the enemy does give us lies, and there's very many people who would have been there for him, supported him while being good mentors to him through it. But we have to be people that those around us see us as safety. Those around us see us as cheerleaders. Like we as Christians should be the loudest cheerleaders on this earth to the other people around us. We shouldn't be those like judging other people, comparing churches, comparing, people's callings, being jealous that somebody else is walking out like something that they would want to be walking out. Like we should be the biggest cheerleaders and the biggest farmers in sowing seed. So what I'd like to do is, if this message has really hit you as somebody who has kind of shut off and not felt safe to being poured into, to being a son or a daughter, could you raise your hand? Did I phrase that well? I'm really bad at asking questions. Ethan's always like, you got to rephrase that. People didn't understand that. And I'll be honest about it. Okay, let me rephrase it in a different way. Okay, if you're somebody who's isolated from others being involved in your life, is that a better way of saying it? Can you raise your hand? Okay. If you're somebody who is a mature believer, can you gather around those people? Okay, so we have two back here. Sorry, you guys don't know where they raise their hands. Randon. And then I'm so sorry, I don't know your name. Carol, okay. And then Carol, if you love the Lord, can you gather around them? And we're gonna just, I think, Elliot, there's a song that can be played. We're just gonna put on some music. I just wanna have some time just to pour into each other. And then for everyone else, if you're not gathered around them, we're just gonna spend some time in prayer. And if you could start just asking the Lord, just to yourself, okay, who God in my life are you calling me to open up to? Who God in my life are you calling me to pour out to? And we're just gonna have some time just to pray. Again, if you need prayer, you can raise your hand too, and we'll gather around you as well. Anybody need prayer? Anybody? Don't leave yet either during this time. I have announcements at the end, and this is still part of the service, so please don't leave. If you want prayer at any time during this, just raise your hand and we'll come around you. We're going to go out and live life differently. This stuff just makes me excited because I look at I've been so blessed by the people that have poured into my life. The people that have, and it's Jesus in my life, But he uses us. And I've just been so blessed by it, and I'm so excited to see the relationships and the pouring in and out amongst us, but then also beyond us, right? So I've got some announcements, but before I just want to say go really spend some time. I would get a journal or just a piece of paper or whatever, and I would start writing these things down of what are ways I need to open up? Who are people that I feel like the Lord's asking me to value legacy with? Because if you don't flesh it out, you're just going to forget about it. You're also not going to be held accountable to it. And I want you to put it on a Post-it note on your mirror or in your car. I want you to have something in your mind, because this is the works of the hands and feet of doing something. It's going to take some discipline to do it and to keep doing it. Especially when things fall flat, because sometimes you'll do it and it won't come out the way you expected, and you just have to be it was worth it. The harvest is later. I'm going to keep doing it, keep going. So I encourage you to do that.